So first up, if we could go here. Ooh. Nope, that's not what I was trying to do. Um, I might just leave it in. So I'm here. I am sick. My throat just, right there is killing me, and I am going to lose my voice at any moment. So I figured I should get a jump start on the day and film this before that happens. So I've got my tea and I have my voice and I didn't wash my hair, and nobody be mean about it. But today's a really cool day and I didn't want to put it off for another day, and I don't know how long it's going to be without a voice. You know what I mean? So I wanted to get this done now. Now, what we are doing today is a recipe that has been requested, and the Sudzers in the Discord have been kind enough to remind me about it multiple times, which is good. I love that we have the kind of community where you're not afraid to remind me of things. Like I'm going to get mad or some shit, because I'm not going to get mad, you know? But anyway, we're doing a recipe that I promised a long time ago, really. And I will tell you more about that recipe and why we're doing it and why the need arose in the first place in just a minute. But before I do, hello, I am Mrs. Soap and Clay. Let's make stuff. How's it going, Sudzers? Welcome back to the channel. You are at Soap and Clay, where we make all the soapy things. And you are here for week 17 of year 3, and we are doing a recipe today, specifically a shortening recipe. So I thought that we could do that today, and I would also talk about shortening because it can be a confusing thing to put into a soap. And there are a lot of reasons for that. But because this is such a simple recipe, such a simple pour, and such a simple cut, I did want to spend some time here and kind of talk about the shortening and why that's complicated, and realistically what you do with the shortening to put it into your soap. And because I am in my office now and not in the soap shop, I have access to multiple screens, so I can do the thing and like share everything with you and not have to edit something in later, which is cool for me. So first up, all of the questions. What is shortening, right? Why do we want to put it into our soaps? Are there benefits of putting it into our soaps? And how do we do it? And also, what is it made of? So shortening is basically used in baking more than anything else, but so much of the oils and butters that we use, for soaping are also used in baking, but it just basically means solid fat. And that can be made out of any number of things, right? You can do tallow, you can do lard, you can do vegetable oils, or you can do a combination of all of those things in one amalgamation. Now, for the reason why we would use shortening in our soaps, well, it's kind of simple. It's because it's very cost effective to do so. Shortening is very cheap and it is easy to source, and it has a lot of benefits from a lot of fatty acids because of the combination of different things that they put into the shortening that you would typically want in your soaps anyway. So it's a good idea for sure. But one of the problems, I just said it's a solid fat that can be made out of tallow or lard or vegetable oils comes, well, first up, how do I know what shortening I'm getting? So very first, you really do need to read your labels. Like the one I just showed you with the Crisco, it does say that it is, all vegetable. There is another version of it, both with the Crisco and with Great Value, that's made out of lard or tallow. So those are animal byproducts. So if you are running a strictly vegan line, you obviously want to get the one that's all vegetable. Now, one of the reasons why tallow and lard would be used is the same reason why they would use the vegetable oils that they do for something like this, i.e. typically soybean and corn and palm. And that reason is because it's cheap. In order to make a shortening that can be used in a variety of products in substitute of butter, for baking, you use some of the cheaper oils, fats that are out there in order to create it. As you may know, because you have used soybean or corn oil in the past, soybean oil and corn oil are liquid. So that begs the question, right? How is shortening a solid, or more specifically a semi-solid? And the reason for that is the hydrogenated oils that are put into it, or more specifically a process to make them hydrogenated. Now, we will talk more about the unsaturated and the saturated fatty acids within the pouring of this soap, but I did want to point out right off the top that there is a process that these oils undergo in order to make sure that they are a solid or a semi-solid in the shortening that you see in the can. That does become kind of complicated then, and becomes really tricky once you figured out what your shortening is made out of, i.e. you look at the ingredients list. How then do you put it into a soap? Well, in Soap Calc, you can actually go down. So in your oils, fats, and waxes tab, right, you can scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you can find like Walmart Great Value something. Yep, Walmart Great Value Shortening, tallow, palm. So that's realistically what you're going to be adding to your recipe, regardless of whether or not it's the animal version or the plant version. And let me tell you why. But before I tell you that, let's just take a quick look at the actual fatty acid profile of Walmart Great Value Shortening, right? It's selected, so that's what this is. So we've got almost none with the lauric and the linoleic and the linolenic, and almost none with the myristic. And so realistically, what the shortening is high in is going to be your palmitic, your oleic, and your stearic. Now, comparing that to a beef tallow, basically the same with the lauric, the myristic, the linoleic, the linolenic, and also kind of the same properties. It's within the same range for palmitic, stearic, and oleic. Palmitic and stearic, good for bar hardening, among other things. And the oleic is what you're going to find in an olive oil, for example. It's good for moisturizing. So it's very similar with that. And if we go up to the palm oil, higher in palmitic, hardly any stearic, and about the same for oleic. So what you're getting is an added benefit of the stearic, so the bar hardening from using the shortening over a palm oil. But when we look at corn oil on its own, right, you have the palmitic it's much lower, hardly any stearic, and about the same amount of oleic. But remember, with the shortening, it's also combined with a soybean oil usually, as well as a palm oil. So we just looked at palm oil. We can look at the soybean, and also low in palmitic, low in stearic, high in oleic. I know that there are a lot of people that are really concerned about the saponification value and how much it's going to change your soap or mess up your soap if you get this wrong. And, so it seems a little bit strange that, again, the Walmart Great Value Shortening is there for both the animal version or the vegetable version. Well, let me show you why that's not a big deal. So we're sorting the oils by saponification. And so if we go down until we find the Walmart Shortening, okay? So here for the potassium hydroxide is on the left and the sodium hydroxide is on the right. It's 0.14 for a solid bar of soap. So what else is around that 0.14 area? Well, tallow beef, very close. Palmoline, very close. Palm oil, very close. Palm stearin, red palm butter, lard, pig tallow, stearic acid, horse. Soap Calc has a lot of oils here that I never knew about. And even arguably going into, your macadamia, your hazelnut, and your almond oil. So realistically, anything from that 0.143 to 0.39 range, your saponification doesn't change enough to actually produce a dangerous bar one way or the other. Because A, first and foremost, these saponification ranges, they're not precise. And two, your scale is never going to be precise in accordance with how this was measured. So there's usually always a range for saponification, and as long as you're staying within those ranges, you can reasonably sub that out. And I think we have talked about that before, but I did just want to talk about that because it's been something that's been questioned a whole lot. So we briefly talked about the why and we've talked about the what, but we're going to talk more about this how and formulating the recipe while I make this. And realistically, the recipe, all of that to say, this is a 100% shortening soap. And we're going to talk about why I'm doing it this way, why I think it's a good idea, and of course do a lather test and all the jazz, because I'm having fun with those right now, you know, in the pouring and the making and the cutting of the things. Okay, so today we are doing a shortening soap, and we are going to be using, as I said, 100% shortening for this recipe, just to see what it does. And so the recipe itself, again, 100% all vegetable shortening, and this is at a 5% superfat with 2.4 times water to lye, and I will be also including kaolin clay in the batch, and I believe I am scenting it with the lavender rosemary delightful thing from Sierra Candles. Now, as you can see, all of the ingredients in there, so we've got soy, palm, and mono and diglycerides, and so that's just as a process of the hydrogenated oils within all of this. And also I found it kind of interesting that this guy has a best if used by date of October 2020. I have had this in the soap shop for several years, and I think the last time I used it must have been in a master batch class wherein people wanted to try, or a master class where people wanted to try shortening soap. So we're going to go ahead and use it, even though it's 3 years past its best if used by date. But for this particular soap, again, the kaolin clay will be going in. It is a very small batch, so we are making just 4 bars of soap, about a pound in total for the batch. And I am going to be blending the kaolin clay into the lye solution, or into the oils rather, before I put the lye solution in. And interestingly, when I got this out of the microwave, first up, it was insanely hot. Like it was around 185 degrees. And I got really, bored waiting. And so I finally poured it at 142 degrees. And the lye was completely cold. It had been actually made the day before and sat in my soap shop overnight. And my soap shop gets down to, about 50 degrees or so overnight. So you saw how thick it got immediately just by nature of putting the lye into the actual shortening. And then again, as you continue working with the stir stick, you can blend all of that out, which is good. So false trace immediately, that's what can happen if you, use your oils too hot or your lye too cold. Either way, but it does start to work out. I also did have a problem getting this to trace, which I found to be very interesting. I have never actually had to stick blend anything that long. And now, obviously, within the soap calc, I am using the saponification, and I, input the thing for the Walmart Great Value, which is the same it's the same ingredients from the Walmart to the Crisco. So I don't quite know why people would buy the Crisco over the Great Value, because it's a difference of like $3 a can. It's like $8.49 for the Crisco and like $5.18 for the Walmart. Okay, now on to the pour of this, and I don't know if you noticed, but when we were looking at the different saponification values and the, breakout of the fatty acid profiles from palm to sunflower to tallow to the Great Value shortening, that the sunflower and the corn the soy and the corn both had kind of high amounts of linoleic acid, right? Which in the finished product of the shortening, you don't see. The linoleic acid is reasonably low. The reason for that is when the oils are actually hydrogenated. So essentially what they're doing is they are adding hydrogen to these oils and forcing them to bind, and the studies show that the linoleic actually turns into stearic through the process that they use. Essentially we're just changing the saturated fats to unsaturated in that process as well. So those actually end up being pretty equal when it's all said and done, your saturated to unsaturated, which is why I really wanted to test it as it is, just 100%, to see if, because of the, equal amounts basically of saturated and unsaturated, if it's not going to create just a really awesome bar just off the top. That is also very strange. I find this interesting, just how quickly this set up. This was about 3 minutes on the counter before I went to move it, and the edges were already solidifying. And on to the test, and yeah, my first thought in all of this, because it's good with the oleic, the palmitic, the stearic, the myristic, I think it's going to be a nice conditioning bar, kind of tight bubbles, but this thing right here is not very hard, just right off the bat, and I would prefer that my bars are harder, 12 hours after they've been cut, or, they've been poured. And so if I were doing a proper recipe with shortening, I would probably be adding some coconut oil to this, probably around 20 or 30%, just to increase the bubble, because we don't have a lot of cleansing value with this, not a big bubble, and also to increase the bar hardness. I am concerned that these are going to take way too long to cure, and I don't like that. But I do love how beautiful that design is. It was completely accidental. Like, I was literally just messing around to show that this soap is, what I say it is and not something else. But I really enjoy that design and think that it could be a beautiful flower soap. If you did it with reds and pinks, it could look like a rose. So you could go back and see what I did to actually do this. But what I did was I put all the white in, and then I poured the green starting really high, back and forth in swoopy motions, lowering the container that the green was in until all of the green was actually in the mold. And then I did a swirly, just a figure 8 swirl down the center. And that's how that became that. So let's check out the test and see what we think of this bar. And this is 1 day later. So the soap itself is about 36 hours old. It's still dentable. My soaps are never dentable 36 hours old. So don't like that right away. And the slip of this bar, it's so slippery. It's too slippery. I don't like it. This is soap that you drop. And so, yeah, for me, I would definitely be putting the coconut oil in because it's going to help with the grip. And as you can see, tiny, tight little bubbles. So I would prefer a better lather with this. But I think just testing a 100%, shortening soap so you know what it looks like, how it performs, all of the things, it gives you a really nice baseline to really go off of in formulating your recipes using shortening, because it's not bad. That lather's not terrible, especially 36 hours. Shortening is pretty cheap, so that works. And the fatty acid blend of the, total shortening is pretty great. So there's the shortening soap. And there it is, a bar made with 100% shortening. And yeah, like I said, it ticks a lot of boxes. And so there is a benefit to using something like a shortening in your recipes. If you'd like, you can think about it in like a master batch kind of way, right? Like Brambleberry sells it. I think they do like a big bubble blend or something, that they sell on their site where you can just buy everything already, measured out in one container. It's kind of like that. It's like master batching. And so that when you're going into this, you already have high levels of palm, of stearic, and of oleic, and you really don't have to play with those two terribly much. So then you can add some other oils and whatnot if you want to increase a bubble or you want to increase the conditioning or what have you. But shortening can be a good benefit within your soap making for sure. Obviously, if you're going palm free in your line, you can't do a shortening unless you're doing an animal shortening, in which case you can, So we make all those decisions on our own. You get it, all the things. I hope you guys had fun and learned some stuff today. My head is like cotton, and so I kind of feel bad that I'm talking about something like this when maybe I should be a little bit more not sick. But it is what it is. And I hope that I covered everything. But if I did not, obviously leave a comment below, leave a question, and I'm happy to answer it for sure. Thank you, Sudsers, for existing, for being you, for being awesome. I don't know if I've announced the winners yet by the time you see this. My hope is to do so today. So, yes, for Project Soapway. So there's that. Thank you for everybody else who is watching and whatever. Subscribe, do the things, whatever. I'm going to go. I am sick. I love my Sudsers and everybody else that doesn't subscribe. I don't understand you. So I will talk to you guys all again tomorrow, probably, assuming I still have a voice, for another week, another round of soapy fun. Bye.